Philippines versus USA. It's the battle of the countries. Let's start now.
Subscribe now.
So when it comes to the USA and the Philippines, I was born in the US, so I have a really good sense of what that country is like. And now, after about 3 years of living in the Philippines nonstop, I feel that I have a pretty good sense of the things over here where I could really compare both countries. So let me start off first by talking about the pros of living in the US. For me, living in the US, it is just so easy in so many ways that Americans mostly take for granted. For example, the infrastructure is just incredible. The roads, where I lived in California, there would often be 7-lane freeways on each way, and I know a lot of Americans are thinking, yeah, but what about the traffic at certain times of the hour? But try moving to another country where they don't have those things and just imagine what the traffic will be like there. But the food in the US, whether you're going to a restaurant or a grocery market, there's just endless selections of anything you can imagine. We just take so much for granted because there's just so much there that you could get. You could order from Amazon or so many other places, have things shipped to you sometimes even the same day, maybe 2 days if it takes a long time. There's just endless variety, endless selection, endless everything you can imagine there. The other things in the US is the healthcare system is just really incredible. I know, again, people in the US are gonna complain about the problems, but again, live somewhere else and let me know what you think for a while. So the US, in summary for me, the big pros are there's just so much stuff and a lot of great stuff. Whether you wanna eat it, whether you want to make something with it, whatever it is, there's just an endless supply of things in the US. The other thing, though, that I would say about America is that things are very streamlined. There's great systems and processes for doing things online. If I need to renew my driver's license, I just, go online, and I think it probably took me 10 minutes. Really, these type of processes compared to a lot of other places are just so wonderful and make life so much easier, and you don't realize how good you have a lot of these things until you're somewhere where it just doesn't work quite so streamlined. On the other hand, cons of living in the US. I don't think this video has enough footage for that, but for me, I think it really starts with the people, especially in recent years. I just see so much polarization. People just really have this sense, mentally, of you have to check the same boxes of what I think for you to be okay, and if not, we're going to polarize. I really feel that Americans have lost the sense of disagreeing without being disagreeable. Now it's, if you disagree with me, you're on the other side, and you're not a real American, or whatever else it is. And of course, for so many people, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but for so many people, it's not. There's just so much tension, so much polarization, so many people that were close and had great relationships that are now divided or just not even speaking to each other, or blocking each other on Facebook because they just can't hear what the other person has to say if it's different than what they think. So for me, the biggest cons of the US these days have to do with that kind of toxicity as well. There is rioting, there is, just so much going on that just shows how much people are struggling with each other. A lot of those type of things, I really understand people's struggles and their dissatisfaction. And I think a lot of that just ultimately comes from people not listening to each other and being able to treat other people as they would want people to treat them. In the US, I would also say a huge con is there's just more struggling. Kind of more struggling than the Philippines. What do I mean by that? Imagine how many people there is in the US just right at this current moment who are working hard, a good 40, 50-hour work week, and then living out of their car because a full salary just won't even pay the bills in so many states now. So many people are trying their best, and their best is just simply getting them in more debt. So these aren't lazy people, these are hardworking people where an honest day's wage just doesn't pay the bills for them. You see so much more homelessness in the US. You see so much more violence in the US compared to a country like the Philippines. So my family and friends will sometimes, say to me, "Are you sure you're safe there in the Philippines?" And I'll just have to laugh like, do you realize where you live? There was 25 school shootings just like in the first 5 months this year alone. You're worried about my safety? I'm worried about your safety in the US because these problems are just so huge over there. So how about let's just move on to the cons in the Philippines, since we just talked about the cons in the US. So for me, the first cons is just a lot of lack of infrastructure. A long drive here might only be 10 miles because they just don't really have wide freeways and things like that to be able to travel long distances quickly. So often, a day trip here won't take you super far compared to the US, but it's kind of a smaller space over here as well, so it doesn't impact you as much as it might in some other parts of the US. Food here, I just gotta say, I love the food variety, selection, everything else in the US. So much more than the Philippines. I know a lot of people really enjoy the food here as well. I just can't say that I'm one of them. So for me personally, I'd have to put that down as a con. The systems and processes here are so unnecessarily complicated. So often, you might be living in one part of the Philippines, but for some reason have to fly to Manila just to lodge paperwork. So a lot of things that would be so much easier if they were just put online, or if there was additional regional offices, would save so much time. And really, when you're used to so much convenience like that, those really feel like pretty big cons at time as well. There's some really crazy drivers here. I think part of that is there's just narrower streets and there's cars and 5 trillion motorcycles, and they don't always play nicely together, and then you get people walking across the street. It really could be quite a challenge here. What are the pros here? Everybody knows it's a developing country, and so with that comes some different struggles. So a lot of people are gonna say, come on, compared to the US, you're gonna tell me there's some pros in the Philippines? Absolutely, and let me tell you the main pros that ultimately lead me to living here. So for me, it's just all about the people. The first 3 things that I love about the Philippines, I'll tell you what they are. Number 1 is the people, number 2 is the people, and number 3, I'll tell you in just a minute. So when it comes to people in the Philippines, I have to say that if anywhere I've been in the world, I've never been a place where I've seen just so many kind, respectful, happy, content, just really people that are just such a joy to be around day after day. It's truly different how people talk to each other here. A lot of the words like po or sir, ma'am, a lot of those type of words are just kind of built into the language and really show how people talk to each other with respect. When I first came here, I thought they were talking to me like that just because I was the old foreigner dude. But it's not like that at all. That's how colleagues talk to each other at work. That's how somebody will talk to a taxi driver, a jeepney driver, just anybody wherever they go. People talk to each other with so much kindness and respect. I will see people dancing at work, singing at work, but just really enjoying their life. And there's just something about being around people like that is a huge pro to living in the Philippines, even when things are really tough. I mean, believe me, there's struggle in the US and there's definitely struggle here. It's kind of a matter of perspective when it comes to struggle. If you've had certain struggles in life, it kind of becomes your baseline of struggle, no matter where you live. And people sometimes will have really hard times, and they'll, at other times in life, everything is just smooth sailing and going great. In the Philippines, though, what I find is that when the going gets tough, people just really care for each other even more. I'll hear people singing even more. I'll see people just, I remember seeing photos just recently where it was really flooding like crazy in the streets from all the heavy rains. And there was like a jeepney kind of coming by through the very deep water trying to get people to work. And there was people that were just like paddling boats in the flood, people that were like laughing and cheering, the buses, jimneys trying to make it through this water while people are just like soaked to death. I mean, whereas I try to think of that scene in the US, if there was just massive, flooding and people's work clothes were all wet and things like this, like the level of complaining that would be going on in the US for those systems. But here, people were just making jokes, laughing, maybe not turning, water to, what do they call that? Maybe not turning, lemons to lemonade, but they were turning the flooded streets into a place to like just paddle a boat. So really making the most of those situations. And I've just seen that time and time and time again here. Filipinos are real people with real emotions, real struggles, but somehow they're just able to cope with stuff that, Americans couldn't cope with, where we would just, I don't even know how to put in words how we would react in these situations. Filipinos are just somehow able to make it through these things with just grace and strength and flexibility and patience. Another thing as a foreigner that's really great about living in the Philippines is almost everybody speaks English, so communication is really simple here as well. And I mentioned there's a third pro that I especially love about living in the Philippines, and that's just all of the beautiful islands. I mean, amazing clear blue water, white sand, beaches, and travel from one place to another is really inexpensive here. You're often gonna just pay about $20 to go from one island to another, and it makes it a lot of fun living here as well. So when I look at both countries and I look at the pros and cons, for me, I really feel that if you're looking for a place where everything just happens on clockwork, where you could get anything you want, where everything goes, pretty much your way most of the time, and if not, you can complain and somebody's gonna fix it, live in the US. It just has so much going for it in terms of processes, systems, variety, just convenience. The US, I think, is really the king of convenience. On the other hand, if people is what really matters to you in life and you want to be around people that are a joy and where there's so much respect and joy and people making the most out of even hard times, then you want to move to the Philippines. And for me, at this stage in my life, I really am going to pick happy, respectful, kind people that are a joy to be around over some tacos and being able to order Amazon easy, even though I do miss those things. So come on, Mexican food, come on Amazon, come over to the Philippines, and I'll be good to go. Let me know, what do you think? What are the pros and cons to the US in your opinion? And what are the pros and cons to the Philippines? I would love to hear your comments below. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, I would love to have your support. And as always, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and have a great day.